Dr. Elena Vasquez never believed in dragons until she found herself face to face with one in the remote mountains of Tibet. The renowned paleontologist had spent 15 years studying ancient fossils, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. Standing before her was a creature that defied everything science had taught her about extinct species. The discovery began 3 months earlier when local Sherpa guides reported strange sounds echoing from the forbidden caves of Mount Kailash. The Tibetan government, initially dismissive, changed their tune when satellite images revealed unusual heat signatures emanating from deep within the mountain. The temperature readings were impossible to ignore. Something inside those caves was generating heat levels comparable to a volcanic vent, yet no geological activity had been detected in the region for centuries. Elena received the call on a rainy Tuesday morning in her laboratory at Stanford University. The voice on the other end belonged to Dr. James Chen, her former colleague who now worked with the International Geological Survey. His words were measured, careful, as if he himself couldn't quite believe what he was saying. "Elena, we need your expertise on something unusual. The Tibetan authorities have requested an international team to investigate some caves. The local people are calling it the dwelling of the last dragon, but we think it might be a previously unknown species of large reptile that has somehow survived in isolation." The flight to Lhasa took 18 hours, giving Elena plenty of time to study the preliminary reports. The heat signatures were consistent and strong, suggesting a large creature with an unusually high metabolic rate. The acoustic readings captured by the monitoring equipment were equally puzzling, low-frequency rumbles that seemed almost musical, unlike any known animal vocalizations. Upon arriving in Tibet, Elena joined a small team of scientists from around the world. There was Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a British zoologist who specialized in reptilian behavior, Professor Lu Wei from Beijing University's Department of Ancient Cultures, and Dr. Rajesh Patel, an Indian biochemist whose work on extremophile organisms had earned him international recognition. The journey to Mount Kailash took 3 days by jeep over rough terrain. The local Sherpa guides, led by a weathered man named Tenzin, spoke in hushed tones about the caves. According to Tenzin, his grandfather had once seen the dragon as a young boy. The old man described a magnificent creature with scales that shimmered like molten gold and eyes that held the wisdom of ages. "My grandfather said the dragon was not evil," Tenzin explained as their convoy navigated a particularly treacherous mountain pass. "He said it was the keeper of an ancient gift, waiting for the right time to share it with the world. But that time had not yet come when my grandfather was alive." Elena found herself strangely moved by these stories, though her scientific mind remained skeptical. Dragons were mythological creatures, products of human imagination and cultural folklore. What they were likely to find was a large python or monitor lizard that had adapted to the unique environment of these isolated caves. The entrance to the cave system appeared suddenly, as they rounded a rocky outcrop. It was larger than Elena had expected, easily 20 feet high and nearly as wide. The opening seemed to pulse with warmth, and, even from a distance, they could feel the heat radiating from within. Strange mineral deposits around the entrance gleamed with an iridescent quality that none of the scientists could immediately identify. Dr. Mitchell was the first to comment on the unusual atmosphere around the cave. "The air composition here is different. There's definitely something producing oxygen at an accelerated rate. Look at how lush the vegetation is near the entrance, despite the altitude and harsh climate." As they set up their base camp, Elena noticed that the local wildlife seemed unusually active around the cave area. Birds that should have been rare at this altitude circled overhead in greater numbers than expected. Even more intriguing were the reports from the guides about large footprints found near the cave entrance, footprints unlike any known animal. That first night, as Elena lay in her tent reviewing the data they had collected, she heard it. The sound was exactly as described in the reports, a low, resonant rumble that seemed to come from deep within the earth. But there was something else, something the instruments had failed to capture. The sound carried an emotional quality, a sense of loneliness that touched something deep in Elena's heart. Professor Lu Wei had spent the day interviewing local villagers, collecting oral traditions and folklore about the cave. Over dinner, he shared some remarkable findings. The stories are remarkably consistent across different villages, even those separated by considerable distances. They all speak of a great dragon that has lived in these mountains for over 1,000 years. More interesting is that they all mention the same thing: the dragon is dying and wishes to give humanity a final gift before it passes. Dr. Patel's preliminary analysis of the mineral samples from the cave entrance revealed something extraordinary. The iridescent deposits contained elements that shouldn't exist naturally on Earth. The atomic structure was unlike anything in the periodic table, yet the material was stable and seemed to have remarkable properties. "I've never seen anything like this," Patel admitted, holding up a small sample that seemed to glow with its own inner light. "The molecular bonds are impossibly strong, yet the material is incredibly lightweight. If we could understand how this is formed, it could revolutionize materials science." Elena volunteered to be part of the first group to enter the cave. Along with Dr. Mitchell and two of the more experienced Sherpas, she prepared for the descent into the unknown. They wore specialized heat-resistant suits and carried equipment designed to monitor air quality and temperature. Despite all their preparations, Elena felt a strange mixture of scientific excitement and inexplicable dread. The cave descended much deeper than their initial estimates had suggested. The walls were smooth, almost polished, and covered with the same iridescent mineral deposits they had found at the entrance. As they ventured deeper, the temperature continued to rise, but, remarkably, it never became unbearable. The air remained surprisingly fresh and breathable. After walking for nearly an hour through winding passages, they emerged into a vast underground chamber. Elena's headlamp swept across the space, revealing something that made her gasp audibly. The chamber was enormous, easily the size of a cathedral, with a high domed ceiling that disappeared into darkness above. But it was what occupied the center of the chamber that truly took her breath away. Curled upon a bed of what appeared to be crystallized minerals lay a creature of impossible beauty and magnitude. The dragon was real, and it was magnificent. Its scales did indeed shimmer like molten gold, and they seemed to pulse with an inner fire. The creature was larger than Elena had imagined, easily 60 feet from nose to tail, yet there was nothing threatening about its presence. As her eyes adjusted to the extraordinary sight, Elena noticed something that filled her with both wonder and sadness. The dragon was clearly ancient and appeared to be in declining health. Its breathing was labored, and there was a quality of weariness about its posture that spoke of great age and approaching death. When the dragon opened its eyes and looked directly at her, Elena felt as though she was looking into the depths of time itself. There was intelligence there, ancient and profound, but also a deep sadness. Without understanding how or why, Elena knew that this magnificent creature was indeed dying, and that it had been waiting for them to arrive. The dragon's eyes held Elena's gaze for what felt like an eternity. In that moment, something extraordinary happened that would change her understanding of consciousness and communication forever. Without any spoken words, Elena began to receive images and feelings directly into her mind. It was not telepathy in any science fiction sense, but rather a form of pure emotional and conceptual transmission that bypassed language entirely. Through this impossible connection, Elena learned the dragon's story. Its name, as close as human language could approximate, was Perithian. He was indeed the last of his kind, the final guardian of knowledge that stretched back millions of years. Dragons, Elena discovered, were not mythological creatures but an ancient species that had once shared the earth with early humans, serving as teachers and protectors of wisdom. Dr. Mitchell, standing beside Elena, was experiencing the same phenomenon. Her scientific instruments were recording unprecedented electromagnetic activity in the chamber, but she barely noticed the readings. The dragon's communication was overwhelming in its clarity and emotion. Through the mental link, Perithian showed them visions of his past, flying over primordial forests, teaching early human civilizations about fire, agriculture, and the healing properties of plants. The dragon's people had not been beasts, but rather highly intelligent beings with lifespans measured in millennia. They had watched over humanity's development, sometimes intervening to prevent disasters or share crucial knowledge during dark periods of human history. Dragons had been behind many of humanity's greatest leaps forward: the discovery of metallurgy, the development of medicine, even the first understanding of astronomical cycles. But, as human civilization grew more complex and aggressive, the dragons had gradually withdrawn from direct contact. Wars, hunting, and the human tendency to fear what they didn't understand had driven the dragons into hiding. One by one, Perithian's people had either been killed by humans who saw them as threats, or had simply chosen to retreat so far from human contact that they eventually died of loneliness. Perithian showed Elena visions of the last few centuries of his solitary existence. He had waited in these caves, sustained by the unique minerals that his body had learned to process over countless years. The iridescent deposits throughout the cave were actually a byproduct of his metabolism, a substance that his kind had evolved to produce, which had remarkable properties for healing and energy storage. The dragon's communication became more urgent as he shared the real reason for bringing the humans to his sanctuary. Perithian was dying, and, with his death, invaluable knowledge would be lost forever. But, before he passed, he wanted to share one final gift with humanity, not just information, but a physical legacy that could help solve some of the most pressing problems facing the modern world. Dr. Patel, who had remained at the cave entrance monitoring equipment, suddenly burst into the chamber with excitement barely contained in his voice. "The readings are off the charts. Whatever that creature is producing, it's causing remarkable changes in the molecular structure of everything around it. The air quality has improved dramatically, and I'm detecting compounds that could revolutionize medicine and energy production." Elena, still connected to Perithian's consciousness, understood what Patel was discovering. The dragon's body produced a substance that was essentially a biological miracle. It could purify contaminated environments, accelerate healing in living tissue, and store massive amounts of energy in incredibly stable forms. This was the gift Perithian wanted to share, not just the substance itself, but the knowledge of how to synthesize it. Through the mental link, the dragon began teaching Elena the complex biological and chemical processes that his body used to create this miraculous material. The knowledge was vast and intricate, involving understanding of molecular biology far beyond current human science. Elena felt her mind stretching to accommodate concepts that seemed almost impossible, yet were demonstrated by the living proof before her. Professor Lu Wei, who had been documenting everything with his cameras and recording equipment, suddenly stopped his work as he too began receiving Perithian's communications. The cultural historian found himself understanding, for the first time, the true source of dragon mythology in human cultures around the world. Every legend, every story of wise dragons and their gifts to humanity, had been based on real encounters with Perithian's people. "This changes everything we know about human history," Lu Wei whispered, his voice filled with awe. "Civilization didn't develop in isolation. We had teachers, guides who helped us through our most crucial developmental stages. The knowledge they shared with our ancestors formed the foundation of human progress." As the hours passed in the chamber, Perithian's breathing became more labored. The ancient dragon was using his remaining life force to transfer as much knowledge as possible to the human scientists. Elena realized that this communication was taking a tremendous toll on the dying creature, but Perithian was determined to complete his mission. The dragon showed them visions of potential futures, both promising and terrifying. He revealed how his gift could be used to clean polluted oceans, restore damaged ecosystems, and provide unlimited clean energy. But he also warned of the dangers if this knowledge fell into the wrong hands. The same substance that could heal could also be weaponized in devastating ways. Through the mental connection, Perithian impressed upon the scientists the enormous responsibility that came with his gift. They would need to be careful about how they shared this knowledge, ensuring it was used for the benefit of all humanity rather than for personal gain or national advantage. The dragon had watched human nature for millennia and understood both its potential for greatness and its capacity for destruction. Dr. Mitchell's zoological training allowed her to understand aspects of Perithian's biology that escaped the others. She learned that dragons possessed a unique genetic structure that allowed them to consciously control their cellular processes. They could literally think themselves into healing injuries, extending their lifespans, and even modifying their physical structure when necessary. His entire biology is integrated with his consciousness in ways we never imagined possible, Mitchell explained to the others during a brief moment when the mental communication paused. Dragons aren't just intelligent animals, they're living examples of what's possible when consciousness and biology work in perfect harmony. As night fell outside the cave, Perithian's communications became more personal and emotional. He shared with Elena his profound loneliness, having lived for centuries without contact with his own kind. But he also expressed a deep satisfaction that his long vigil was finally ending with purpose. His death would not be meaningless if his knowledge could help humanity evolve beyond its current destructive tendencies. The dragon revealed that there were caches of the miraculous substance hidden in other locations around the world, places where dragons had once lived and died, leaving behind deposits of their processed minerals. He provided Elena with detailed information about these locations, describing how to identify and safely extract these materials. But, perhaps most importantly, Perithian taught Elena how to create a synthesis laboratory that could reproduce the substance using conventional materials. The process was incredibly complex, requiring precise control of temperature, pressure, and chemical combinations that pushed the boundaries of human technology. Yet it was possible, and, with careful work, humanity could learn to produce unlimited quantities of this revolutionary material. As dawn approached, Perithian's strength was clearly failing. His golden scales had begun to dim, and his massive form seemed to shrink slightly as his life force ebbed away. But the dragon's work was not yet complete. In his final hours, he had one more gift to share, a gift that would forever change Elena's understanding of her own potential and humanity's future. In his final hours, Perithian revealed the most profound secret of all. The substance he produced was not just a material with remarkable properties, it was a catalyst that could enhance human consciousness itself. When properly prepared and used in minute quantities, it could expand human cognitive abilities, allowing people to access forms of perception and understanding that had been dormant in the species for millennia. Elena felt a tingling sensation as Perithian shared this knowledge. The dragon explained that ancient humans who had worked closely with dragons had possessed abilities that seemed supernatural by modern standards, enhanced intuition, accelerated learning, and even limited forms of the mental communication she was experiencing now. These abilities had gradually faded from humanity as contact with dragons ended and the genetic markers for expanded consciousness became dormant. Your species has the potential for so much more than you realize, Perithian communicated, his mental voice growing weaker but more urgent. The substance I produce doesn't create new abilities, it awakens what was always there, waiting to be rediscovered. Dr. Patel, whose biochemical expertise made him most qualified to understand the technical aspects, felt his mind reeling as Perithian shared detailed molecular formulas and synthesis procedures. The dragon's final gift was not just the miraculous substance itself, but complete instructions for creating a refined version that could safely enhance human cognitive function without harmful side effects. The implications were staggering. Humanity could potentially solve complex global problems by enhancing their collective intelligence. Climate change, disease, poverty, and even interstellar travel might become achievable with expanded human consciousness. But Perithian was careful to emphasize the enormous responsibility that came with such power. As the morning sun filtered into the cave chamber, Perithian's breathing became increasingly shallow. The ancient dragon was dying, but his expression conveyed peace and satisfaction. He had completed his mission, passing on the accumulated wisdom of his species to the humans who would carry it forward. Elena found herself crying, overwhelmed by the connection she felt with this magnificent being. Through their mental link, she had experienced echoes of Perithian's millennia-long existence, his memories of flying through starlit skies, his joy in teaching early humans about fire and healing plants, his deep sorrow at watching his species disappear one by one. Remember, Perithian's communication was now barely a whisper in her mind. Knowledge without wisdom is destruction. Use what I have given you to heal your world, not to control it. Help your species grow beyond its fear and aggression. The universe is vast and full of wonders, but your planet is the only home you have. With these words, the great dragon closed his ancient eyes for the final time. The golden glow in his scales gradually faded until his massive form lay still and peaceful in the crystalline chamber. Elena felt the mental connection break like a severed cord, leaving her with an overwhelming sense of loss mixed with purpose. Professor Lu Wei documented Perithian's death with appropriate solemnity, understanding that he was witnessing the end of an era that stretched back millions of years. The last of the dragons had passed, but his legacy would live on in the knowledge he had shared. Dr. Mitchell, ever the scientist, began taking careful measurements of the changes occurring in the dragon's body after death. Even in death, Perithian continued to produce the miraculous substance, though at a much reduced rate. His body was literally transforming into a treasure trove of materials that could benefit humanity for generations. The team spent 3 more days in the cave, carefully documenting everything and collecting samples under Elena's direction. She had received the most complete information from Perithian and understood the delicate procedures required to safely handle and process the dragon's gift. When they finally emerged from the cave, the world outside seemed different to Elena. She could see patterns in the natural environment that had been invisible before: energy flows, chemical processes, and biological interactions that Perithian's enhanced understanding had made perceptible to her. The cognitive enhancement he had shared was already beginning to manifest. The journey back to civilization was complicated by the magnitude of what they had discovered. Dr. Patel's preliminary tests confirmed that the samples they carried possessed properties that could revolutionize technology, medicine, and energy production. But Elena was acutely aware of Perithian's warnings about the potential for misuse. After extensive discussion among the team members, they decided to approach their revelation carefully. Rather than immediately publishing their findings or turning over materials to government authorities, they would first establish an international research foundation dedicated to studying and developing Perithian's gifts responsibly. Elena returned to Stanford University, but her life had been fundamentally changed. Working with carefully prepared samples of Perithian substance, she began developing the synthesis laboratory exactly as the dragon had instructed. The process was incredibly complex, requiring equipment that pushed the boundaries of current technology, but it was possible. Dr. Mitchell established a parallel research program focused on the biological aspects of the discovery. Her work with the cognitive enhancement properties of Perithian's gift required extreme caution, but early results were remarkable. Test subjects showed enhanced problem-solving abilities, improved memory formation, and increased capacity for complex pattern recognition. Professor Lu Wei dedicated himself to preserving the cultural and historical knowledge that Perithian had shared. He wrote extensively about the true history of human-dragon interactions, carefully documenting how dragon guidance had influenced major developments in human civilization. His work provided a new framework for understanding mythology and folklore as historical records of actual events. Dr. Patel's research into the material properties of dragon-produced substances yielded breakthrough after breakthrough. The materials were stronger than diamond yet lighter than aluminum, could store enormous amounts of energy, and possessed self-healing properties that defied conventional physics. Applications ranging from space exploration to medical devices seemed limitless. 2 years after Perithian's death, Elena stood in her new laboratory watching the first successful synthesis of dragon substance created entirely through human technology. The process was slow and expensive, but it worked. Humanity now possessed the ability to produce unlimited quantities of this miraculous material. More importantly, the research foundation that Elena had established was beginning to see results from their careful application of Perithian's gifts. Small-scale trials of environmental restoration using dragon substance had successfully cleaned polluted rivers and restored damaged ecosystems. Medical applications were showing promise for treating previously incurable diseases. But, perhaps most significantly, the cognitive enhancement research was revealing humanity's true potential. Volunteers who received carefully controlled doses of refined dragon substance showed remarkable improvements in creativity, empathy, and problem-solving ability. They retained all the benefits permanently, suggesting that Perithian's gift was literally awakening dormant human capabilities. Elena often found herself thinking about the last dragon and the trust he had placed in humanity. Looking at the positive changes beginning to emerge from his final gift, she felt confident that Perithian's sacrifice had not been in vain. Humanity was slowly learning to use his gifts wisely, approaching the responsibility with the reverence and care he had hoped for. The dragon's fiery gift to humanity was not just the miraculous substance or the enhanced consciousness it could provide. It was also the lesson that true wisdom came from understanding the connection between all living things, and that the greatest power was the power to heal rather than to destroy. In his final act, Perithian had given humanity not just the tools to solve their problems, but the wisdom to use those tools responsibly. As Elena looked toward the future, she could see glimpses of the world Perithian had envisioned, a world where humanity had grown beyond its destructive tendencies and learned to live in harmony with their environment and each other. The last dragon's gift would continue to transform the world for generations to come, ensuring that his ancient wisdom would never truly die.